Hey there, my name is Cole Adams, and you are watching the best college basketball podcast out there that covers the entire sport of college basketball, brackets, bubbles, and bid stealers. Now, here are your hosts, Sam Fetterman and Jonathan Lidskin.
Season 6, Episode 12 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. I am Sam Fetterman. That is Jonathan Lidskin. Jonathan, how are you doing? Or after the last time I said that.
I'm doing great, Sam. We have pretty much been talking for, an hour straight now. So, doing just as good as I was an hour ago.
That's pretty amateur compared to what we've done.
Oh no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
We've done some marathon shows and then some marathon bracketology phone calls.
Yes,
it's time to preview the Arkansas Razorbacks with Anthony Christensen. Anthony, how are you? Welcome back to the show.
Doing well. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me on. How are you guys?
Well, we're doing the same as we did 10 seconds ago.
Can't complain.
It's just a courtesy question. Come on.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Sam, come on.
I must ask, has John Calipari commented on your hair since the incident?
No, he is not. He's not. Not a ton of opportunities to do so, but in the couple of times I've talked to him since then, he has not commented on it. And to be fair, it's in desperate need of a haircut again. So maybe that's his next comment is to tell me.
You should ask him what barber to use.
I'll burn a press conference question on that next time.
Yeah, according to some Twitter users, you have no job, so you should have plenty of time to get a haircut.
All right, let's talk about the Razorbacks, who have a very interesting roster. A lot of returning players, which doesn't feel right to say about a team coached by John Calipari. DJ Wagner's back, Carter Knox is back, Javon Brazil is back, Billy Richmond is back. And obviously, you do have the token highly ranked freshman class, Darius Acuff, Malik Thomas coming in, a couple of transfers coming in as well. So this Arkansas roster is positioned in a similar way in terms of there's not a ton of depth on the roster. It was also not a ton of depth last year. But there was some proof of concept at the end of the season. Going to the Sweet 16, beating that St. John's team, taking Texas Tech to the wire, just a couple points away from the Elite Eight. So Arkansas is moving into year 2 under John Calipari with some momentum. What do you think is who do you think is the most important of the returning players for the Razorbacks?
I think it's DJ Wagner. I think obviously when he was coming into college, he was projected to be a one and done lottery pick kind of guy. Obviously he's back for his junior year. He dealt with some injury troubles his freshman year, and I think when Boogie Flan went down last year and he really had to take on the primary ball handling duties, if you will, I think that's kind of when Arkansas kind of turned things around. Not to say Boogie Flan wasn't doing a good job, but I think DJ Wagner, for one reason or another, when he took over as the primary ball handlers, when Arkansas really started to gel and really start to play well. So I think if he can do that, if he can gel with Darius Acuff, who I've heard is having a really nice summer, if those two can gel and play well off of each other, I think that Arkansas's backcourt's going to be looking pretty good. But yeah, of that returning group, I think DJ Wagner is probably the most important because I think he's going to have the ball in his hands more often than not.
Jonathan, what's your line about this backcourt?
Darius Acuff is not just the best point guard in this backcourt. He's the only point guard in this backcourt.
Yeah,
I actually do agree with the sentiment that DJ Wagner is very good with the ball in his hands. I just don't think that he's a guy you want necessarily initiating your offense.
That's the weird thing that has always been kind of my drawback with DJ Wagner. He's not tremendous off the ball, not very good off the ball, but he isn't a point guard because he doesn't pass well enough. He isn't a true off guard because he doesn't shoot well enough. And he's a good finisher, but he doesn't get to the line. After saying all that, you would think that I think he's terrible. But I don't. Like, he's a good player. The talent is clearly there. He's had moments where he's looked like one of the better guards in the SEC. That's the big question, though, is can one of those pieces that I just mentioned take a step forward? Can he get to the line more, being more aggressive? Can he shoot the three better? Can he be a more reliable on-ball playmaker? I don't know. I think that he's got to take a step forward in at least one and a half of those things. But I'm a big Darius Acuff fan, so I do think that he won't need to be the point guard for this team because Acuff is this team's point guard. Darius Acuff, for my money, is one of the 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 best freshmen coming in to college basketball this year. Super fast, can score really well. I've liked him for a couple of years at IMG. I think when it comes to Acuff's game, it's still not extremely complimentary of the rest of these guys. I'm not sure how complimentary this backcourt is, but you can't deny that there's a bunch of dudes that can really score.
Yeah, I was waiting for the question, but no, I think it's going to be a lot of fun just to see how these guys kind of come together and play. I think Malik Thomas is a guy who's going to be asked to step in and be an immediate scorer, an immediate scoring threat. Just because when you look at the roster, there's not a lot of shooting that comes back. I think that's one of the big concerns that, at least if I were an Arkansas fan, I would have, is that there's not a lot of big time shooting threats. So you're going to probably need, a guy like Malik Thomas to step in and be that, or, maybe you ask a guy like Isaiah Sealy to step in and, improve in that area of his game as he enters college basketball. So I think that's the big thing. But I think the backcourt is certainly interesting. I think that the way that those guys are going to, come together, how they're going to play together, it's going to be an interesting dynamic to watch. And it's kind of a similar story to what this past season was, because everybody was like, how are DJ Wagner and Boogie Fland going to play together? Obviously, they played together at the Team USA youth levels before, so they had a little bit of chemistry, but sometimes it just didn't really work. So I think that's definitely the area to kind of watch.
Yeah, I think when you're, mixing these three, and when I say three, I mean Acuff, Thomas, Wagner, it's going to be real interesting, like what pairing emerges as like the best like two-man pairing for that backcourt. But like, Thomas is a good shooter. I think they definitely need that on this roster. And like, Acuff is, a true point guard, which, they can't say that they definitely had last year. So I think like those two, regardless of like fit, they definitely fix issues that Arkansas either, had last year or realized that they had in the offseason.
Yeah, and I think another big issue that they really went out of their way to address was their rebounding. I don't know if you guys remember the rebounding numbers in their NCAA tournament games. They were not close. And you go in and you get, Nick Pringle from South Carolina, you get Malik Ewan from Florida State, two guys who can rebound at a decent clip. So I think that's another area that they've definitely gone out and tried to mitigate, tried to improve in. So I think those are the big areas, is that and the depth that Sam mentioned beforehand, because last season it kind of got very touchy there when Boogie Flam went down and then Adu Thero went down. So they're down to a 7-man rotation, basically. I know they threw Jaden Caroletta into a couple of games, but I mean, he wasn't really truly part of the rotation, even with those two guys down. So I think those are probably the biggest concerns that I would have with this roster.
Yeah, Arkansas had one playable center in physical games last year, and now they definitely have two. So
yeah,
that's huge. Pringle, super experienced guy, been through the mud, been through a couple of teams in this conference. I think that's a guy that is going to be valuable. I think Ewan is also going to be valuable. I wonder what Ewan looks like in a more scaled down offensive role, because he was so important to Florida State last year as the second option to Jameer Watkins. He had a super high usage rate. He took a ton of shots, but they were mostly in the paint or right around the paint. So I don't think that Ewan is necessarily. I don't think he's a black hole. He does pass a little bit, and he can definitely move. Like he's athletic, but he as a non-shooter with a non-shooting with a backcourt that doesn't shoot particularly well, I still think that like there's a lot of stress that's going to be put on the paint defensively, and we'll have to see where this goes for Arkansas. But they certainly have a lot of guys that can score in a bunch of ways, just not in the ways that just not in the shooting way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, for sure. And I think Malik Ewan is going to be an interesting one to watch, just in how they use them. I asked John Calipari about Malik Ewan whenever we first got to talk to him after he had signed. And I mean, to me, it just sounds like he's super excited to have him in the offense and have him kind of somewhat semi in like a facilitator role. I think he really isn't excited about his passing ability, like you had mentioned. So I think he's going to be an interesting one to watch. Defensively, like you mentioned, I think there's going to be a stress on the paint. I don't know that their rim protection is going to be as good as it was a year ago. I know Trevor Brazile is, a decent rim protector. He's not the most physical guy in the world, so maybe there's a concern there. But I mean, Zvonimir Visic now at Illinois, I don't remember exactly where he ranked in terms of blocking percentage, but it was definitely up there. And you'll lose a guy like that. Jonas Aidoo could protect the rim as well. I think that's defensively probably one of the big concerns. But yeah, I don't even know where I'm going. I just kind of started rambling, so I'm sorry about that.
No, I think you make a good point about the rim protection, and it's interesting because I think at least for their position, like Knox and Richmond, like their athleticism definitely can help with that. Obviously, you're not replacing Zvonimir Ivisic, who was as skinny as he was. He had a 10.5 block rate, which is just absurd. One of the
Not
best
bad
in the country. So, but yeah, those guys are probably more in like a Dutiero role, like smaller players, obviously, but can be similar defensively if they get there, like impact wise. I think the weird thing about this team is just like I'm so interested to see how they run their offense, just because the shooting obviously you could have more. Malik Thomas should help you with that. Carter Knox actually did shoot 35% from three last year, which I did not think he was going to coming out of high school.
Yeah, he progressed. He progressed, and is not to interrupt you. I'm sorry, but
no, go for
it. Throughout the season, Carter Knox's 3-point shooting it just kept getting better and better. Like his corner threes. I think at one point he was like 70% over a five game stretch, which obviously it's a small sample size, but he was shooting at a high level and at a decent volume as well. So I think he certainly added that to his game throughout the season. But yeah, so maybe he's another one who they could rely on for shooting purposes, along with Malik Thomas. I mean, Trevor Brazile can stretch the floor a little bit. He can shoot a three, but I don't really think that you're wanting to rely on him to shoot threes. I mean, if he gets one or two here and there, that's all well and good, but I don't think he's a guy who you're telling to just hang out on the perimeter.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Carter Knox definitely progressed in his shooting as the season went on, and his defense. I think he had back-to-back blocks in the same possession against, it was either St. John's or Texas Tech. I can't remember which. One of those teams that wears red. And and I mean, yeah, he and Billy Richmond is also a big-time defender who they're going to rely on that side of the floor as well.
Yeah. It's pretty rare in college basketball that you have like 4 or 5 non-bigs that can consistently finish through contact. And I think that's the case with this finish through contact at the rim, I should say. And that's could be the case with this Arkansas team when Knox is really good athleticism. Richmond can finish around the rim, and from what we've seen from Wagner and Acuff in his high school tape, those two can as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's kind of always been one of the big things with the John Calipari offense, right? Dribble, drive, get to the rim, and try to draw contact as well, but finish through the contact most importantly. So, yeah, I think that's a roster. I mean, it's a roster that's probably going to be built around, or not probably, is probably built around just that. And I am intrigued to see how all of the pieces fit together, because the talent is obviously there. I think everybody who, can look at a roster can see that this is a very talented team. Just how the pieces all come to fit together, especially the newcomers kind of jump and with the returners, which it's the story with a lot of teams, right? But when you have a core of guys who were as important to Arkansas turning its season around last year as important as these four guys were, adding the newcomers to that, especially on the offensive end, I'm intrigued to see how it works.
How do you think the center rotation works? Because like last year, you had really Adu and Ivasic only played really the center spot, and then you had Brazil, who got a few minutes here and there at center, but obviously wasn't a huge part of that center rotation. So do you think that these two guys are more closer to 50-50 again, or do you think one probably has the edge?
I think right now it's probably closer to 50-50. If I were being asked to give the edge to one or the other, I think I would go with Malik Ewan, just based on how much, or just how excited John Calipari seemed to have him when I asked him about him. Not to say that he's not excited to have Nick Pringle by any means. He's very excited to have Nick Pringle. But I don't know, something in the way he was talking about Malik Ewan made me think that he's really, really excited to have him and utilize him in the offense. And I do think Trevin Brazil will get some minutes in that 5 spot as well, maybe play some small ball there. But I do think it's probably going to be, at this moment in time, obviously, probably a 50-50 split between Ewan and Pringle, and I'd probably give the starting edge to Ewan.
Jonathan?
Sam, you got anything else?
Sorry, I was a little distracted, but I do think that it would be valuable for them to get some Brazil minutes at the 5, but they have 2 guys that can give them quality at the 5. So I don't think they necessarily need it, but I think it would give them some security.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it just gives another option, right? I mean, I don't think anybody's going to complain about some versatility or just depth, like we talked about so much about, this upcoming season and last season with Arkansas. So I think that's, yeah, it certainly wouldn't hurt to get Trevin Brazil in that center rotation at all, I don't think.
Has Cal talked a lot about, the way he's built rosters at Arkansas? Obviously, his first year, he gets the job late. There's only so much portal work that's left to be done. But you look over this roster and, initially you would think that this is really an 8-man rotation again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think he is. And he mentioned it coming into last season. He wants a shorter rotation and fill out the rest of the roster with basically just kind of practice guys. So it's a risky kind of philosophy when you take into account the possibility of injuries and everything like that. But that's kind of one way that he's doing it. And then coming into this season, I think there was a big focus on retention, keeping guys, and making sure that he kept the guys he wanted. I guess that core that we kind of keep going back to of, Wagner, Acuff, or not. He's not retaining Acuff. He's getting Acuff. I'm stupid. Wagner, Brazil, and Richmond and Knox. I think getting those guys back is big. And even a guy like Jaden Caroletta, who, played a grand total of 5 minutes last season, but is a scholarship guy and is somebody who's been through the program and kind of knows what is expected. And I know that's kind of a cliche thing to kind of bring up, but yeah, I do think that kind of continuity is important. And
has Cal explained why he prefers the shorter rotation?
Because it leads to fewer headaches when it comes to playing time and NIL. And every time he's asked about it or kind of brings it up whenever he's doing a speaking engagement, he says, and then somebody will ask me, what if somebody gets injured? Well, then you're going to have even more happy guys because they're going to be playing more of the minutes.
Okay, you know what that sounds like?
What's that?
Lazy roster construction. That straight up sounds like an excuse for being lazy.
And then he always just kind of brings it back to what he did at UMass and a couple of, sometimes at Memphis, sometimes at Kentucky, where, at UMass, I don't remember which year it was, but he was talking about how we only had 7 guys.
Which year it was.
Yeah, it's a long time ago, don't get me wrong, but he's set in his ways, I guess, and yeah, no, he's very excited about the pieces he has for sure.
Very set in his ways that he learned back in the day as a former Pitt assistant.
Jack. We had to bring it in here.
You knew that was coming.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It had to.
How far away could you spot that in the sentence?
I knew it was coming. Like as soon as you were like that, he learned way back, and I was like, I know where this is going.
Light bulb went off.
All right.
Former Cal assistant John Calipari is probably my greatest contribution to this world. So,
all right, Jonathan, do you have anything else to add?
Yeah, I just you kind of touched on it, but it is really interesting. I'm going to take a more positive angle than you here, Sam. As
I also want to be clear. Like, I like this roster. Like, I think it's good. I think they're going to be good. I just think that the construction is not as good as it could be.
Sure. Yeah, and as the biggest John Calipari defender in the college basketball sphere, I will say that it is so interesting to see him. It's interesting to see him and any coach at his age just kind of change their philosophy of the way they manage minutes this late in their career. I think you guys mentioned it. Like he was platooning at one point with Kentucky teams. Like it just kind of is interesting to see.
He stopped platooning pretty quickly.
Yeah, well, when you don't have 7 NBA players on your roster, it's a lot harder to use a platoon system.
No, I'm just saying that platoon lasted like 4 games against the Little Sisters of the Poor.
Devin Booker running your second unit.
Not bad.
Yeah.
No, you should consider that.
But no, I do think it's a very good roster. I think it'll be interesting to see how everything kind of comes together, especially with the schedule that they're kind of putting together to this point. They've got Louisville at home in the SEC ACC Challenge, Houston in New York, which is kind of out of the way for both of those schools if you think about it a little bit. But I'll never complain about a trip to New York City. But the roster, its construction, and how everybody gels together, it's going to get put to the test real quick. When you look at, obviously, like I mentioned, Houston, and they play Duke on Thanksgiving. And
will you be in Chicago for that?
I will.
Awesome.
I think that's my plan. I hope
Will
so.
Will you be in Brooklyn?
That's the plan. I hope.
I still am not sure what I'm going to end up doing that day, but I hope I end up going to that and Duke Texas Tech.
That would be a lot of fun. No, that Duke Texas Tech game is going to be very good, but
maybe I can squeeze in Penn Rutgers.
Yes, the best there is. But no, like I was mentioning, I do like the roster a lot.
You got to see former UNC Wilmington head coach Fran McCaffrey. All right,
you have to.
Let's wrap this up.
All right. If you came to hear about Tyler Self and where he's working, you came to the right place. If you came to hear about Division I college basketball coaches calling out Anthony Christensen's haircuts, you came to the right place. And if you came to hear about the latest happenings with Caleb Grill, you came to the right place. This has been Season 6, Episode 12 of Brackets, Bubbles, and Bid Stealers. And we'll see you in about 35 minutes.